All right. Welcome, folks, to another episode of Manufacturing Growth Talks. I'm your host, Dan Burgos. And if you've never joined one of our calls, this is a conversation we have with another manufacturing executive, another manufacturing colleague. And we kind of take a path through memory lane and understand what they've been through, the wars, the scars, the insights, the stories, and hopefully each and one of us takes at the very least one nugget of knowledge that we can take back to our businesses and just learn and apply. So today I have with me a veteran for in a lot of industries within manufacturing, someone that was in the military in past lives, as we like to say. So please welcome Sean Bolling joining us today. Sean, thanks for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I looked at your background as I was saying off camera and noticed all the places you've been and all the things you've seen. So I can't wait to dive into some of the things you've encountered in your journey. So I'll start with thanking you for your service. I noticed you were in the military some time ago. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And
Thank you
then
so much.
second, yeah, can you give us kind of a high level, what's your background? I'm sure most people that will watch this may not be familiar with Sean, but give us kind of a high level, what's been your background? What have you done in your career so far?
Sure. So, as you made mention, my career journey started in the military. So, coming out of college, I spent 6 years in the Army as an armor officer. So that's tanks and that type of thing. And that was right in the during the height of the global war on terrorism. So the op tempo was very high. I actually had my first daughter right before my second year-long combat deployment.
Oh, wow.
So right around the time that we started having a family, I started thinking that it's probably a good idea to start looking for a different line of work.
Yeah.
For those that, of my cohorts that are still in, I tell them all the time, all the respect in the world for you guys sticking it out and everything else, because it is the greatest job you'll ever have in your life. It's just a matter of not being able to do other things while you're in it sometimes. Sometimes the rest of your life comes secondary to that. And starting a family for me at that time, that was our goal, that was our target. So that's the direction we started to go. So once I got out, I started looking at what would make sense to translate those skills and the type of not only um, type of work that I was doing, but really where would the um, leadership principles that you're so ingrained with from the military best fit coming out? Where could I apply those where they would still be
Right.
valuable, where they could really drive results, build cultures, all that type of stuff? And operations, I was an ops guy in the military. I figured an ops guy in the civilian world was probably the way to go. So started out in manufacturing, and right when I got on the floor, I was home again. So I've been in
That's
operations ever since. And obviously it goes in different iterations of difficult situations and good situations, but overall, it was very clear to me early on and continues to be that, as I like to tell people, this is the only function I can survive in. Operations and
ah,
continuous improvement is just home for me.
I got
Anything
you.
else just doesn't feel like I'm doing the right work. But like you had mentioned, I kind of started that journey in CNC machining type work, sort of metal manufacturing. Spent a few years doing that and then moved on to thermoset plastics. So, and it was within the same company, and then injection molding. And then, kind of went through several iterations in industries of whether it be food and beverage, whether it be medical device, whether it be,
Yeah.
oil and gas, what have you, export packaging and logistics, and where I'm at now, which is basically print media and third party logistics fulfillment. It's been definitely an interesting journey in that what I've found is every industry has exactly the same problems, just slightly different in application, right?
Interesting.
Everything from making sure that you have the right vision for your team to execute against, that you got the right leadership in place to help them do that, And then all of the different, and I'm sure, with your company's mission, all the different continuous improvement tools are equally applicable everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter changing all those industries, even though I've had a pretty diverse run of it. What I found is all the problems are generally the same. They just look a little different in application.
Yeah, that's a good call. We go to companies and yeah, we see things that seem repetitive. They manifest themselves a little bit differently, but at the root cause, it's typically the same thing. So
Absolutely.
let me start by asking you. You said that working for the military, right, was the best job you could have. That caught my attention. So, apart from the obvious, like serving your country and the patriotism and just being proud, my best friend. He's in the reserves, and he says, you have this brotherhood that nothing just parallels to it in the sense that I've got your back and so on and so forth. Can
Yep.
you tell me what goes through your mind when you say that's the best job you could have?
Well, and I think it has a lot of connective tissue to what you just said. It's really a couple of things. I think one thing is there's always a clear vision, there's a clear mission, right? So you understand kind of where you fit in the overall effort, and how you contribute, and you can tell whether you're doing so. And I find that that's just as meaningful in the civilian world too, but in the military, it's just sort of ingrained. It's sort of the base culture there. And then the other part of it, frankly, is just shared suck, right? You just go
Uh
through a lot of stuff together, right? And you probably, in manufacturing, you find the same thing, just at a different scale, right?
yeah,
Whenever anyone tells a story about, over beers or whatever, it's never about, hey man, you remember that time we all came into work and everything went right and we really just had a great day? No, never. It's never about that.
right.
That's why pretty much every story you'll hear from people in the military is, the worst moments that they went through together and everything else, to where it's sort of that shared bond of experience that, gives you both that bond, and it also kind of teaches you that, yeah, the current situation is a little tough, but we've seen tougher, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
let's get over ourselves a little bit, right? This is not fun. I'm not going to pretend that I'm having a good time here, but trust me, we've been through worse, right?
Yeah.
So I think the combination of those two things is really what drives that, and it's difficult to find outside of the military simply because you're kind of dependent on the culture of the institution you fall in on.
Yeah.
And sometimes you find it and it's there, and other times it's not as present, and you can kind of feel that.
Yes, I agreed with you 100%. It feels like the military has that by design, whereas in the business world, it's not as much present. It's just depending on how the players come together, the circumstances, the expectations,
Yep.
sometimes how much influence you have that you can help shape that culture. So a lot of variables there that you have to
Absolutely.
play with.
And as you and I have talked about behind, off camera, Dan, I mean, when you talk about cultures, my belief is they're purpose built, right? You build a culture for what you're trying to achieve. And in the military, obviously, they need everybody bound pretty tight because they're going to put you through some pretty tough stuff.
Yeah.
And your mission itself is sometimes a little bit, daunting, right? It's tough. So if your culture is not one of cohesion and sort of shared, experience and that tight bond, then it's not going to work,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you talk about a manufacturing team or a sports team or any type of team, whatever you're trying to achieve, that's the culture you got to build. That's the military's base culture because that's its purpose. Based on what it needs to do, that's the type of culture it needs to have to succeed. And I don't think any place is any different. It's just you just have to figure out what those things are that are going to build the culture your group needs to succeed, depending on what the purpose is.
I think there's one common denominator I would add to that is that there's got to be high levels of trust. And I think, in the military, it's almost by design, as I said a little bit ago, like we're trying to do something. Let's say if you're deployed and you're involved in engaged in combat, it's life or death. Like you got to take care
Yep.
of me, of my 6 o'clock or whatever the case. And I have to reciprocate because Otherwise, it's life or death here on the line. And so, as long as you can develop that level of trust, which is more of an uphill battle, because to some degree, the business world, it's more like we're I'm focused on my career and what can I do, and it's not this shared purpose, this shared objective that we have a lot.
Yep.
Of course, it can be developed, but it becomes a little bit more of an obstacle, I find. Let me ask you this other question before we move on from the military. So, can I've over the years, I've worked with numerous people that came out of the military, and I've seen, I have the utmost respect just from volunteering and just sacrifice that's been made and the guts that it takes. But some people have demonstrated amazing leadership abilities that, it makes you think, oh my gosh, everybody that comes out of the military is just an amazing leader. But unfortunately, that's not been my experience. Sometimes people come out and they come out with the wrong leadership, attitudes or principles and what have you. And so
Sure.
I'm curious, how did the military shape your leadership principles, your style, your philosophy, and so forth? How did that influence you that you then turned around and said, okay, I shall go forth and apply this in the business world?
No, that's a great question, and it's a great observation because I like to tell people, and I put myself very much in this category as well. When you talk about the military, it's not a monolithic. Everybody that goes in comes out the same way, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like any big company or any big culture, right? You have folks that really like embrace it and take good things out of it, and then we also have folks that hey, didn't take the right things out of it and go do things. It's like any company has your top performers and your folks that don't perform so well, and you think, well, they came from the same company. what
Yeah.
what's going on there? So when I went into the military, and it was kind of beaten into my head, I went to military school prior to getting into the army, and through that experience and then the initial immersion into the military experience, one of the things you're taught from a leadership perspective is the entire purpose of leadership is to take care of the people you lead, right?
Oh,
And that it
that's
is a
awesome.
privilege to do so, right? You have a great responsibility because those that report to you or those that you're privileged to lead, your job is to figure out how to take care of them so they can do their jobs and do them well, right? And that is just beaten into you, and there are folks that kind of take that on and really embrace it, and that just turns into the way they think about leadership. It kind
Right.
of fits that whole, the servant leader model is very popular in the business world. A lot of people talk about that, but that's sort of the base expectation, and it's just, I don't want to say beaten into you over and over again, but really it's, verbally at least, it's beaten into you to the point where when you get into situations where you have a soldier that didn't perform well, if you're their leader, the question asked of you is not what's wrong with that guy. It's literally, how did you fail him? What did you
Oh,
not do? Right. And
that's interesting.
that type of a mindset, I mean, it looks a little different when you apply it outside the military, but it's really the
Sure.
same. Is the And when we talked about earlier about where I thought this could apply, the in the military, you're generally leading a certain size of team, right? Whether it's a squad or a platoon or a battalion or whatever it is, but it's usually a fairly diverse group of folks. They come from all different places, all different backgrounds, all different skill levels, and you got to figure out a way to bind them all together. And luckily, for me, I went into the officer corps. I was lucky enough to have a brilliant, experienced platoon sergeant who was awesome, and who, if any of you going into the army, if you're curious, if you're not listening to those folks when you go in, you're really, really wasting a lot of experience and opportunity. But they teach you how to do that stuff and advise you along the way. So you really learn to listen, understand teams and dynamics, and really figure out the way to bind everybody together to get them looking the same way. Right. And that's what I thought. You get into manufacturing, you're kind of running the same team with a different mission. Hey, we're
Right.
trying to hit a certain target of whether it be production or getting a certain number of parts out or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
But that leadership model fits like a glove. It's really the same thing because your team is all from different places, different skill levels, and your job is to figure out a way to put them in position to win and get them looking to where victory is.
Yeah. Man, that's an amazing learning takeaway from there. I've seen it where when you take the ownership, I love the ownership aspect and then the agency aspect. Like if something goes wrong, it's on me. And then how do I take action to fix it? Which I
Yes.
think we need more and more in our industry. So okay, you came out of the military and now you're going to the business world. And as you know, a lot of your colleagues or peers that come out of the military, it can be a struggle. So, how was that transition for you? And then you landed in a manufacturing environment. I think it was in machinery manufacturing that you landed. Can you talk a little bit
Yep.
about that transition for you?
Sure. So it was, obviously it's always interesting, right? You're going from one environment to a slightly different one, right?
Oh yeah,
And like anybody, I was young when I made the transition, and of course you make your transition mistakes, right? But one thing I found interesting was during the interview process, somebody asked me, "So you're coming out of the military. You don't outrank anybody here. So what are you going to do when you
oh,
can't just bark orders and all that type of thing?" And I kind of smirked and I was like, "Well, let me tell you, you don't just bark orders there either. If you think they're not going to challenge you in the military, if they think you're wrong, oh man, you are dead wrong because
oh,
they
there you go.
absolutely will. You might have the fetal position of rank eventually, but if you're using that right away, you're just a bad leader to begin with, right? And that's the way that the military sees leaders. They don't like people to just throw their rank around. They want to actually be spoken to in a manner that brings them to where you're trying to get them to go. But when I went in, obviously it was a different how to apply those things to a workforce that did not come out of the military and to put things into language that they can understand, use versus the language I was used to using.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and much like, again, in the Army, I had a platoon sergeant. When I got to, manufacturing, I had a lead. I was a production supervisor, was my first job out of the military.
right.
And I had a lead man who'd been there for a decade and seeing how the place ran. And I could bounce ideas off of, hey, if I was going to recommend that we go this way, what type of flack do you think I'm going to get? And he'd tell me, he's like, man, this is exactly what they're going to tell you. We've seen this before, and here's why it didn't work last time, and all this type of stuff. And it was really that figuring out process of, okay, how do I learn what's important to the team so that what I'm asking them to do, I can communicate it as effectively as possible.
Yes.
So it was a little less direct and a lot more indirect leadership. So it was a lot more trying to
Yeah.
understand, um, you know, everybody's individual motivations in terms of where they were trying to go in their career, what type of skill bases they were trying to build, what promotions they were looking for in the future so that I could use that
Yeah.
and, let them know how what we were trying to do, how I could work out some experience for them to go that route and go that way.
Yes.
So it turned a lot more from sort of a real direct conversation because the mission was the same for everybody. The motivation was somewhat the same for everybody to more of a, okay, where's this person looking to go? And how can I leverage that to help the team win, right? If I got somebody who wants more experience in machining, but right now they're in packing, how do I get it to where I can put the packing goals out there to where I'm trying to free up time for them to train on the machines a little bit? But, Johnny, I need the stuff out. So if you can figure out a way to just do it that much quicker, I can get you 2 hours of training on the CNC machines every week. And we can start, going that route on things and developing your career and all that type of stuff. So it was a lot more indirect and dynamic based than it was single mission based that it is in the military.
I gotcha. And so, can you, I guess, in that situation, what were the circumstances? Like, did you have a broken team? Did you have an amazing team? Was the culture just low morale? And what were some of the challenges you came across when making that transition and building that team to be successful?
Yeah, well, and it's funny because the place I went to and started everything out, and again, you you never control where you start, and it's just at the time you probably resent it a little bit, but man, you learn to appreciate it later. So the first place I started, was really the area of the plant. I think the quote given to me was, "Oh my God, they found somebody that wanted this job,"
Oh
when I
no.
first got there, because it was the customization cell, right? It was the area that had the shortest lead times. It was the area that was always behind on time delivery, which was sort of the crown jewel metric at the time when I joined that company. And the group itself, when your department has a reputation of being dysfunctional, obviously the reputation of the team is, oh well, they're dysfunctional. That's our little land of misfit toys out there that is running that
Yeah,
cell,
yeah.
right?
Bad news bears
Um,
type of
the
yeah,
bad
yeah.
news bears, right? So I got in with that group, and once I got my arms around all the things that were going wrong entering that cell. So we were part of the value stream, right? We were one part of it, but we were the end. So we got all the blame
Mm,
for lates and all that type of stuff.
of
So
course.
once I started getting into, well, hold on a second, we didn't have raw material to make that stuff. Why are you blaming us? We weren't late. We didn't have stuff. I don't make the stuff out of cheese, man. I need metal, right? And the turning area hadn't gotten us the material. But once I figured out all those little things, I started really focusing in on the team itself. And really, when they were kind of taught that they were the bad boys and all that type of stuff, they kind of developed that attitude. But once we
Mm,
actually got them to the point where they understood, okay, well, here's all these problems leading up to us. What is it we need to do to control these problems once they get to us? Right. So when I have a
nice.
situation, I'll go to bat. When we don't have material, I'll take care of all of that. But when we got the stuff and we have everything we need, what do we do to get out of this reputation of just being the bad news bears? And those guys were very vocal about what they thought, the problems were that needed to be fixed. But once we actually got it to where the things leading up to us were going pretty well, it kind of became on us. And it turned
Mm,
back on, okay, guys, this part's fixed. What do we do now? We're the ones now that control everything from here on out. And that's when they really started coming forward and saying, well, I mean, when we get these types of parts, the program's been wrong on this forever and it takes 3 times more than it needs to, but nobody's ever fixed it and they won't listen to us. Okay, great. Let's get the programmer out here, walk them through that. Okay, programmer, can we get that fixed? Oh yeah, I didn't even know it was a problem. Yeah, sure, that's a keystroke. Okay, fair enough.
oh, that's
Problem
great.
solved. What do you got next? And it just decouples that perception that everything is terrible and nobody ever listens to us. Once you start following through on some solutions, they take over and they start saying, hey, I just figured out a way that we could actually cut more time off of this. Awesome. What do you got?
I know. I'll tell you, in my experience, I couldn't tell you how many times people have told me from the shop floor when we're working with them, we've been telling them about this forever. Nobody's doing anything about it. And I remember one time we were at this client and we were, putting these plans together, and we had to stop the conversation because he got tense,
Yeah.
and he was saying like, you don't understand, like I've been talking about this forever. And I mean, people really get invested, they're passionate, and what you're saying is so powerful. And when people fail to do that, which I see too often, it's just a disservice to the culture, to the
Yeah.
results, to everything. So you
Yeah.
know
And you've probably
that
seen
that's
this a,
great.
a lot, Dan, in your time, advising companies and everything else. But, I've certainly seen it from within them as I've gone through, several of them and gone through. But one of the mistakes we commonly make, particularly in the leadership realm, is how it is when results aren't good. If you're
Yeah, yeah.
in a plant environment, the plant manager will get the managers together and the supervisors and everything else and say, all right, what's going on here? And we'll start theorizing. Well, it must be this.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to go fix that. And you go tell your people, all right, guys, from now on, we're doing this. And they look at you like you got two heads because, for somebody like me who, I didn't come from machining, I didn't come from plastics, I didn't come from any of the industries I ended up leading. So for me to come down and just say, yep, we have a results problem, I'm sure I know what it is. So from now on, we're going to change the following things. When I have 150 years worth of experience sitting on the floor, where I could reframe it to say, okay, guys, we got this condition. What do you think's causing it? What do we
Exactly.
need to do? Just flip that frame to where you're asking them, explain them what the problem is and what we got to be able to do, but putting it back to, hey guys, you have the experience that I will never have.
Exactly.
What is it that we need to do to be able to get this capability or reduce this amount of scrap or whatever it happens to be, and give them the agency to put their ideas to the test to see if it fixes the problem. When you do that, you tend to engage folks. When
Yes.
you don't, I had a plant manager who noticed that I was getting frustrated because people weren't as excited as I was about the opportunities I saw as a production supervisor. Because in my head, I saw it everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, we can improve this and we can do all that. And he kind of took me aside. He's like, yeah, I notice you don't think your team's responding very well. And I'm like, yeah, I don't get it. Blah, blah. I see all this and we could do this better and whatever. And he's like, well, I want you to remember when these guys go home every night, they don't think about what can I do to make Sean's ideas work. They they are very invested if you flipped it to where they were the ones coming up with the ideas.
100%.
They
Yeah.
are very invested in making those work because it's tied to their pride, it's tied to their talent and experience. To where it's kind of was a light bulb for me. I was like, huh, yeah, that's a great point. So I started, at a young age in manufacturing, kind of flipping to, because of that conversation, flipping everything.
That's
So every
great.
time I got that, hey, what's going on out there? That's a great question, sir. This result is what's lagging. Let me get the team together and figure out where they think the problem is and what their ideas are to fix it.
Yeah, man. I feel like sometimes we get caught up in our own ideas and and we feel like we need to provide the answer, especially, us as service providers, like we need to offer the solution. And honestly, what we're finding more success is that, and to me, I had a similar turning point where you would stress about, understanding as much as you could so you can contribute as much as possible. And really, the way we contribute the most as leaders, which I see it kind of in a similar capacity, is by asking the questions, by pulling it out of them. I mean,
Yes.
I can tell you, just remembering this one client, I was working with the operators, and you know, they go, we go away, we dismiss the meeting. They came back the next month that we had our next meeting, and they had a whole, it seemed like a manuscript, like the solution designed and everything. And I'm like, oh my God, can I please send this to your senior leaders, to the ownership, so they can see how engaged you guys are? It was amazing when you flipped
Yeah.
that. So let me continue with your progression, right? So you started as supervisor, you had that early experience,
Yep.
and eventually, you reached, you managed a plant, you had a whole operation to yourself.
Yep.
What was that transition there for you? Was it, again, was it the top performers and you were just there to babysit them, or were you there to turn around uh, an underperforming unit, or what was that one like?
Yeah. So my first plant management experience, which I think was 3 or 4 years after I started with this company, it was more of a, it wasn't so much a group of poor performers. It was a plant that performed pretty well, but the director of operations who was promoted, he was the plant manager who gave me that advice that I just mentioned.
Oh, nice.
You know, but he thought that even though that plant was performing well financially, walking through learning the team and everything else, he didn't feel they were performing as good as they could. And it was being masked by the fact that they were performing well financially.
Right.
Right. So when he brought me over to kind of walk through that as a premise, I told him he was a little bit skeptical as to some of the players and whether they were the right fit and everything. And, I told him, I was like, sir, I got a 90-day rule. I need to sit with them for 90 days. before I take any of your advice on whether they're the right fit or whatever, because I got to see them in action. I have to understand why they're performing the way they perform, if they're in the right place. Are they getting everything they need to do well? So, I'm not somebody that's going to literally just say, yeah, you're probably right. Get rid of them. I'll figure it out, the type of thing. So
Right.
I went to that plant with that mindset. And it really was a situation where these folks, they had a very profitable product, but their operation had stagnated. The culture was non-existent. The day-to-day relationship between the people was very lukewarm. Everybody was there to do their 8 and go home. To include the managers, like nobody was really engaged in the place or whatever. And so my job when I got there was to try to really get the team to see what we could do if we actually addressed some of the things that they had neglected. Because again, financially, they look great on paper,
Can I add
right? But
one
it was
thing?
that, yeah,
What you were saying is so key, and I want to make sure I highlight it. I've heard of these companies that their margins are just phenomenal, right? And you think about a team that's as disengaged and disconnected as you're describing, and you look at the financials, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, that they must be an all-star cast of people just out there doing amazing things." And when you go out there, you're like,
yeah,
"Oh, there's a disconnect here." But sometimes I've seen this, and I've heard other colleagues say, like, "You're leaving money on the table because of all these things you're talking about." But because they're
absolutely.
doing so well financially, they're saying, "Well, who cares? I'm doing so much,
Yeah.
so
Bring
well. We're making
somebody
so
in to
much
just
money."
keep the noise down. Don't mess
Exactly.
with it. Yep.
And I think we need to, demand better. Like, can you live up to your potential? And not because it's imperative, it's just because
Yeah.
it's the right thing to do and it's productive for
Well,
everyone.
and what you often find is, and you're exactly right. I mean, you leave money on the table in a place that, when you look at comparisons, if you're a multi-division company, when you look at comparisons like, oh, that's where the help's needed, leave this one alone because it's doing great. Look at this. What you find is what you're able to do in those types of plants often exceeds what you would be able to do with a poor performing plant. In some cases, in certain industries, the margin of the product plays a big role in what you can do in
Uh,
terms of financial turnaround and all that type of thing. Whereas if you got a low margin product because you have a market that will not bear any higher price and you're barely scraping by, you can get a percentage point or two in EBITDA improvement by just some OpEx stuff and whatever. But if you have one that is literally, dude, we have a major operational opportunity here and a product that is super profitable as it is. Imagine if you made that 10% more profitable
exactly.
by getting after, OpEx stuff where you don't feel it needs to happen. But, if you actually did it and got everybody thinking that way, and that's what we ended up being able to do, which was, fantastic. And the group that I fell in on, in most cases, it wasn't a matter of them being poor players. It was a matter of them not being informed what the right expectations of them were,
Right.
what right looked like on, continuous improvement stuff and operational excellence tools and things. They just didn't come from that pedigree. They weren't taught that.
Right.
And
Right.
then, I had one that, when I got there, my ops leader never wanted to be an ops leader. A bunch of folks had retired or been laid off, and he was the last man standing who knew the process. So they put him there. And it's not that he did badly, but he wasn't killing it. And everybody kind of saw it when they went through. But he was awesome when it came to supply chain and material type operations and procurement. So I made him the materials manager. He
There
crushed
you
it.
go. Yeah, I think sometimes it's about finding the right job, the right role for the person, because sometimes people just get put in the wrong, position, the
Yeah.
wrong situation, and then they fail or they
Oh,
struggle.
100%. And, when I was a materials manager, because I took on that role for a brief amount of time just to kind of,
It's
um, you know, as kind of a bridge between two positions, I couldn't wait to get out of there, right? Because it just was not what
ah,
I performed well, but I just didn't enjoy it while I was doing it. Like it was,
yeah, yeah. I hear you. I
now,
understand exactly what
now
you're
if you
saying.
set me loose on what I enjoy doing, I perform a lot better, and I tend to be a little less grumpy. But that was kind of what he was forced with because he didn't even want that job. They put him there because he was the only one that knew, and then they kept saying, "Man, he just doesn't seem like he's a good ops leader." And that's what I kept getting told. And then when I got there and heard the story, I'm like, "Well, of course he's not a good ops leader. He didn't want to be."
Exactly. Yeah. So sounds like you help with the expectations. You put the right people in the right place. You gave them some direction. Any challenges, any struggles there to really get that team going that you had to overcome?
Just like anything, when you've been doing something a really long time and you've made a lot of margin doing it, right? Coming back to how good they looked financially. And when you look good financially, what do executives tell you all the time? Oh, you
Yeah.
guys are great.
You guys
Oh
are,
man, you're
yeah, you
killing
guys
it.
are killing it. It's amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
don't
You're
change
all,
anything. You're
yeah.
perfect just the
Yeah.
way you are. So coming in and telling them, hey guys, look, with what you've been doing, you've done a great job. But objectively, we can do better. And let me show you the areas that I can tell you right now we're not that great at. And that's it's hard to see because it's caught, we have such a good margin and we look so green on the metrics from a profit standpoint that we've stopped seeing where the opportunities are. And
Oh
once
my
you
gosh,
started
yes.
getting people, there were some folks that did not come around and they didn't end up lasting, right? So it's one of those things. I did get pushback from a couple of folks that were literally, oh, you're going to destroy this place. Oh no, we've been doing this forever and we've been doing it well, and now you're going to come in and rip everything apart and make us fail and everything. And they ended up moving on, and that's fine. Because what was made clear to them and what I tried to express to them was, hey, look, my job is to try to figure out how to make you guys successful doing this. But if you don't even agree that something needs to be done, I don't know how long you're going to be happy here. And they took that advice and they moved on, and that's fine. We all do at some point, right? We've all been in situations we didn't agree with the direction, so we moved on. But it wasn't, I didn't walk in and everybody's like, "Yay, let's do all these
Oh
changes."
no,
It
no,
was
no, no, no,
it
no.
was really explaining, okay, guys, let me show you where these opportunities are, at least from my perspective, and I'll get your perspective on it. um, and then really kind of calibrating to the idea that just because we've been doing good financially doesn't mean we've been performing great.
Yeah.
And that
Let
that
me
was
ask,
a kind of a unique challenge because on the flip side, I've
yes.
been, in the assignment of, oh my God, we're crashing here. What do we do to,
Yeah,
salvage? Which is
exactly.
both of those situations are difficult in their own right.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's on the one hand, you're dealing with all the stress and everything else of people knowing that, oh my God, we're in such a terrible place. We don't know what to
Yeah.
do. And other ones where it's just like, oh, what are you talking about? We're awesome. Why are you coming in here telling us that
Unless
we
you
need to
have a
change?
I'll say unless you have a spark in there that says we can do better, and then you have a few people that buy into that and they go with you,
Yeah.
you can really go far. But I did want to ask you, when you get that pushback, I feel like one of the qualities that make leaders successful in that environment is being able to withstand, to stay firm, and continue with the direction, not waver in their trust in the process and where they want to
Yep.
go, and let people kind of push them back, especially when you engage with leaders who see that. So what can you talk a little bit about what's key to be successful that way when you
Yeah.
get adversity thrown your way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's coming, right? Like, if you're taking over any sort of leadership position, if you're actually serious about, the role of bringing the team along, yeah, friction's coming. You're going to get pushback. But I think what is most key to making sure that, it's handled productively is the vision's got to be clear. What are we trying to do? Right? And that needs to be ideally at the organizational level, the strategy and the vision should be clear, ideally. But we've all lived in the real world where we're a plant within a company and whatever. Sometimes it's not, right? You need to be able to shape one. Hey guys, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's what we're trying to achieve. Now, what you're pushing back on, I'm not married to any solution, but what you're pushing back on, how would you suggest we go about achieving this? As long as it's in line, I'll give you all the rope you need. If it's not, you got to justify to me why I would pursue it, why you wouldn't do it differently if it's not going to achieve the goal we've all established is what we're trying to do. And I think where a lot of leaders fall down is we get a little wishy-washy with goals. And as a leader, you got to be able to translate. So if I'm telling a group, hey, we got to improve our EBITDA, like that's super inspiring. Don't get me wrong. Uh, but, you know, what you need to be adept at is, all right, if I'm being given the target as a plant manager that my plant EBITDA needs to improve, right? My division president is telling me, hey, Sean, this is not going to work. I need your EBITDA up 5%. My job is to determine for that team, what do I need from you to be able to create that condition, right? So
Exactly.
do I have a scrap problem that's driving me down that path? Okay, great. What is the reduction and how does each team member contribute to that? If you can make that picture clear and give them a measurable and meaningful target to measure them by, it makes the conversation a lot easier because all of the pushback can be measured up against, okay, I get your pushback. Is what you're asking going to achieve what we're trying to do? We've
Yes.
established your cell needs a 10% scrap reduction for us to hit our target. Your pushback, I respect it 100%, and I'm cool with it, as long as your recommendation to do it differently is going to get us to where we need to go, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
that's usually hard to, not that it can't be, because plenty of people argued with me over the years and still do, but it makes the conversation more productive because it reframes in the person pushing back's mind of, okay, well, I better come to the table for how it should be done to achieve what we're doing if I'm going to push back on the crazy guy's ideas up there.
And I'll reference one of your favorite phrases that you taught me the other day we were talking. You got to bring your facts, your numbers, because people will bring emotion and the war stories, and the way
Yep.
you convince them for change is. Can you please
Yep.
drumbeat?
Never bring emotion to a data fight.
Absolutely.
If you're going to push back, that's fine. But talk to me about the mechanics of it. Show me your napkin math.
Absolutely, man. I love that. All right. So, winding down on time, I know you went to a medical device company, highly regulated. Uh, did that sometimes that can be an obstacle? There's some purists about the industry. Uh,
Yeah.
so sometimes that can be a challenge. Did you come across any challenges trying to drive change? Because I know you're
Oh,
an agent of change,
absolutely.
and those highly regulated industries can be stubborn about change in some
Yeah.
cases. And so how did you go confront that, and then how did you overcome it?
Oh, good gracious. Yes. One of the unique challenges to, whether it be food and beverage industry or medical device is you've got the FDA to contend with, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand the regs and requirements of the FDA, which is 100% got to be done. It's part of the industry. You certainly don't want, like, for example, in the medical device field I was in, these are things that were going into people's bodies. You
Yeah.
want to make sure that you are in compliance with the FDA regs. But one of the pitfalls we often fall into, we sometimes make the dragon a little taller than it is. So when we talk about what needs to be done to comply with FDA regs, you tend to come into sort of internal buffering, which is,
Mm,
hey, this is the requirement for the FDA, so I'm going to do 20% better than this to make sure that we can go through. I had a very specific conversation with a quality manager. When we were talking about, because you made reference to my job was I was in charge of building the lean program and deploying it to all the 10 sites. And one of the things that came up was when we were talking about um, visual daily management. And one of the site leaders told me, oh, no, we can't do that because we got to be ready for an FDA audit. And if they see we have all these problems, they're going to ask questions. And I was like, well, that's probably true. But you notice right underneath the list of problems is a action registry for what we're doing about it, right? So if
Exactly.
they saw that, wouldn't you be able to walk them through and say, no, no, we had that challenge, but here's what we did about it. And here was the engineering change we made, and we have the number right here. Well, yeah, we could do that. Well, there you go. So there's a way to do it. We just got to figure out how to do it where it applies and that applies well to this industry. But the quality manager, always sticks in my mind because we were having just a ungodly time getting parts out of a plant. We had backlogs months late, customers screaming, all the familiar stuff that if you've been in manufacturing for 5 minutes, you've heard before. But one of the things that kept coming up once I got the team together and we started kind of walking through a fishbone of, why this stuff could happen, it finally came out that, well, our machines can't even handle the tolerance that we're inspecting to. So how are we even going to ever do this? Like it'll hit it every once in a while, but like 10% of the time, which is why we're so late. It's not repeatable. And I was kind of looking and I'm like, okay, well, what do the visual inspection specs say that we need to hit? And there was a customer spec and an internal spec. The customer spec gave I think it was a time frame you had to look at the piece. And if you didn't see any obvious issues, it was probably good to go from a aesthetic standpoint, a visual standpoint. And then there was an internal one that had it like 5 minutes or something. Well, I'm telling you, Dan, if you give me 5 minutes to look at anything, I'm going to find something
I'm
wrong
gonna
with it.
find something, right?
And so, I was asking the quality manager, I'm like, why? I'm just curious, why the big delta between what the customer expects and what we're kind of flagellating ourselves on? And he's like, well, this is how we ensure nothing bad ever gets out the door. We do better than the customer's wanting. And I remember, and it's just, this was told to me years ago, so I used it on him. And I told him, I was like, well, remember, the customer is what dictates good. And just remember this, extra credit ends with high school academics, bud. We are here to do what the customer's asking. And it sounds like if we did that, our throughput problems might be a lot better than they are today.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of, it's wrestling that, that overinflated monster of what compliance means and really breaking it down to, I don't know, here's what the language in the reg says. Now tell me why making that 10 times more stringent is helping us. We are compliant. The customer specs were well within. So how do we make it to where we break this cycle of self-punishment and just be compliant?
And I think to be successful, especially highly technical folks, you have to be objective, you have to be patient, you have to do your
Yes.
homework, you have to be structured, you have to rally people around you if you can, get experts that can validate what your assertions are, and so on and so forth. So, but
Yep.
man, thank you. Those are some really good nuggets there.
Well,
And
and
then
what I used to tell those guys, because quality and production, you've seen it, I'm sure, a lot. It's kind of like sales and production. Sometimes there's just natural loggerheads that occur.
sure.
And, as a plant manager, when I had both production and quality, I used to tell them, you guys both owe me the same thing, right? You owe me speed and quality. So you guys go figure out together what I need to be able to deliver to customers and also deliver good things to customers. Because here's the divide that is often thrown out there. A quality manager will say, if you ship your customer poor product, you're going to lose customers. Very true, very fair. But here's the flip side. If you can never get your customers anything because you can never get it out the door, you lose customers. So either way, you're customerless. You guys got to figure out a way to get me both. So work together, whether it's the inline inspection, shifting it from the end to the middle of the line, whatever it is, you figure out a way for me to redress quality issues quickly so we can keep things moving out the door and get good things to customers. That's your job. And, once you get it through to them that way, because I actually, at one of my plants, I switched their metrics around for evaluation. I put my production guy in charge of scrap and external PPM, and I put my quality guy in charge of on-time delivery. You wouldn't believe how quickly they got together. and
Yeah.
said, "Well, dude, how do we make this work? Because I don't know."
Yeah, there you go. You created the space for them to have to collaborate. That's great. That's a good tactic. All right, and then most recently, at least you've gone in the world of fulfillment, 3PL. Tell me just a little bit, because I know we've been going a little bit long on time.
Yeah.
What's been that environment for you, that transition? What some of the challenges, and how are you dealing with them?
It's interesting. Like we talked about at the beginning, all the problems are the same. They just look a little different depending on where you are. And what I have seen in terms of, the print and 3PL world is really the problems are primarily around um, predictable delivery, because you're dealing with short lead times and you're dealing with, usually contractual customer turn times and things like that, which is great. But what that relies upon is heavy discipline to scheduling in a way that gets you to be able to hit those turn times. And what do I mean by that? When you're entering an order, if the standard lead time or the contractual lead time is 3 days, you need to enter it for 3 days, and it's got to be
Exactly.
entered same day, because you got to feed the shop in a way that they can schedule for velocity and efficiency and all that type of stuff. Whereas what usually happens is, depending on what's asked for, we just put the if they don't provide a due date, you can put whatever date you want, and a well-meaning person will put same day or next day. So now all of a sudden you're feeding the shop all this stuff. The shop is what it eats, right?
Exactly.
And if you are feeding it poorly, I don't care how great a shop you have, it's going to be unhealthy, and it's not going to give you what you need, right? So the way in which you feed an operation like that, and the way that you set expectations around, okay, what is our discipline with order entry to standard lead time? When we talk about expedite type situations, what is the process for doing that, so that we do it in a manner that takes into account, do we want to push key customers out to get this one off in, or do we want to not do that? So it shifts to kind of the way the shop's fed, because everything's so fast. But if you feed it wrong, it's going to be inconsistent in what it spits out, and that's when you run into problems and trouble, right? So I've been learning that firsthand as I've been kind of watching how everything kind of fits together. But it's easy conversation to have, because once you actually start illustrating that to folks, they see it right away. You,
Yeah.
like you said at the beginning, ask the question, hey, when you guys get an order that doesn't have a date on it, what do you do? I
Exactly.
mean, we usually just put it for next day. Ah, okay.
There we
Well,
go. There's
let's
a
let's
gap.
talk about that for a minute, right? So if I'm doing something next day for a customer that I only do $1,000 of business with all year, and to get that next day delivery, I am pushing out a customer that I do $2 million a year with, and I don't want to lose. Should we probably make sure that, shouldn't we just put it to standard lead time? And if we can do better, we will, but think about it a different way. And
Yeah.
light bulbs come on quick.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. All right, man. Let me wind you down with a few rapid fire questions. Was there a book, a mentor, or someone that taught you a huge, huge lesson for you? And what was it?
I mean, in terms of the books, I'm such a dork with this stuff, Dan, that there's a bunch of them. But I think when I was early on, particularly when I was making my transition from one type of work to another. And, like we mentioned before, I started in a place that was a little tough. It was going through, a little bit of a rough patch, and it was the place nobody wanted to work in the plant.
Right.
Um, there's a book by a guy named General Hal Moore called On Leadership: How to Win When Outmanned and Outgunned. And he kind of goes through the type of leadership that's needed for a tough situation. And it's really not that different from standard situations. It's really all about the right leadership and the right moment, and all that type of thing. So that was a good one there. In terms of mentors, it's really hard to nail down one, because I've been real fortunate. I've had a lot of people, that I've been able to learn from. So I don't think I have anything specific there. But the other book one I can give you is for all of your lean folks, and I'm sure you've read this, but Out of the Crisis is probably the best pure continuous improvement book that I've
Yeah.
used the
Yeah.
most. And my favorite quote from Mr. Deming, with all respect to him, is put a good person in a bad system and the bad system wins. No contest. So it
Yeah.
kind of brings us back to the idea of really needing to build systems right, because otherwise our people ain't going to win.
Absolutely. And we own it as leaders. We own the
That's our
building
job.
systems. It's our job,
100%.
100%. All right, man. Lastly, if people want to get in touch with Sean, what's the best place or way to get in touch with you?
Sure. So, I mean, it's obviously from a LinkedIn perspective, I do run a weekly newsletter called Purpose Built Culture, where I just throw out, you know, observations I've learned over the years about how to build, lead, and sustain cultures the right way, at least in my opinion, and that have worked for me. So if you're interested in checking that out, and I'm always interested in hearing feedback on where I'm wrong, or if it's worked and you've seen it, I'm also interested in that. And then, yeah, just in general, it's, I'm available on LinkedIn if anybody wants to reach out.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for uh dropping all these golden nuggets you've dropped. I appreciate your time so much. And everybody listening, uh check out Sean's newsletter. He drops a lot of knowledge and wisdom there. It'd be good time spent for sure. All right, so winding down and finishing up, if you'd like to be included in a future episode, please reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, and this will go into our YouTube channel. Sean, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and look forward to continuing our conversation as we've been doing in the past.
Yep. Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure, sir.
Absolutely.